Ahoy! Welcome back, everyone. I'm Charlie Dice, here with the podcast in progress. I am going over my podcasting second brain template. Now, the term second brain, you might have heard, originates with a fellow named Tiago Forte. Tiago is the creator of the PARA note-taking system, which stands for Projects, Areas, Resources, and Archives. This is a digital system for storing and organizing all of your ideas, notes, and knowledge in one place. It allows you to capture and curate information and, most importantly, retrieve it when you need it. The idea is to get all the stuff that's floating around in your head and put it somewhere where you don't have to remember it all. Now, you can use a number of different tools for your note-taking system, from Evernote to the Notepad app, even just a system of folders on your computer. But if you're not using Notion, you're missing out on some of the most awesome features of a second brain, which is the ability to create customized workflows and templates that let you finish your work in half the time that it takes your colleagues. That way, you can finish your work early and go outside. That's what I want to do. So let's get on with the tutorial. We're going to be customizing your very own podcasting second brain and learning a few things that I use regularly in Notion along the way. So, those three tools are relational databases, the new buttons feature, and last but not least, customized templates within a database in order to create your own customized workflow. So let's just imagine that we were starting a new podcast. Let's say that it's a podcast about Notion, the Notioneers, and we are going to be interviewing all the top people in the Notion world, from your Thomas Franks to your Red Gregorys. I'm going to go ahead and click this button here, which generates a new entry in my master guest list database. And let's just imagine this one is Red Gregory. By default, this is a guest idea. It's going to automatically assign her the status of idea. I can also add an interview date if I manage to schedule this interview, or if I've contacted her but have yet to hear back, I can move it into this next column. So this view of the database is just tracking, Kanban style, where my guest ideas land in their calendar. I can also rank my guest according to priority here. So let's say there's a really big name like Thomas Frank. I want to get him badly. Then I also have views of calendars where, let's say that somebody agrees to finally do an interview, and I book someone on this date. I can add them here. And likewise, we can have a air date calendar for when these episodes are coming out. Now, let's focus in and drill into one of these particular cards. So we'll take a hypothetical guest, and I'm going to open up this page from the side peek into a bigger view. Now, within this card, we have two more databases. One is a to-do list, and the second is our social scheduler to keep track of all the assets for publication. This is where you will gather up all of your media assets, your finished show notes, blog posts, anything else related to the publishing and promotion, and then, all at once, send it! Now, all of these databases are related to one another in a way that I can assign specific to-dos to a particular show, and the same thing for the assets for that show. So if we peek under the hood here in this database, we find a property, which is a relational field, this little arrow here, showing that it's related to a particular show. And in this case, whenever I create a new to-do item, this database is already filtered just for this particular show. So it assigns my to-do item to this show. So let's say that I wanted to invite the guest. Now if I go back to my main dashboard, I can see that this item has been sorted into the guest number 1 toggle of this to-do list, which will be my master to-do list for all shows, but I can also zoom in and look at the to-dos for a specific show. These to-dos are sorted also into a Kanban, simplified of just the ones you haven't started yet, ones that are in progress, and the ones are done. So right there between these two tables, we have kind of the macro view of who's coming up on the podcast, and then we also have the micro view of what we need to do within a particular podcast episode. Now let's come back into our guest card, and we're going to start populating these to-dos. We could do this by hand and just add all of our to-dos for each episode each time, but that's going to get a little bit tedious. So this is where the second feature of the button comes into play. You can pre-program these buttons to add a series of items to a particular database, such as our to-do list. Now here, I've already programmed in the 6 things that I typically do in getting ready for a podcast, and these go in reverse order. So from last to first, I publish the socials, I order the transcript and the show notes, edit the audio and video, I record the show, and I outline the topics after I invite the guest. Now, each one of these also assigns the status of not started to these tasks, and it relates it to the particular show that is referenced in this page. So if I click this button here, it's going to give me this list of all of my to-dos in order so that I can start moving them through the progression. But that's not all. Within each of these to-do items, if I open it up, I get a list of pre-programmed templates for my to-do list. And these templates roughly map on to the same 6 steps that I'm taking for each episode. So when it comes to inviting a guest, I can click this invite/calendar templates, and it populates with my standard email introduction for guests. I've also got my calendar invite right here so that when the guest accepts, I can just go ahead, pop that into Google Calendar, and I remember, because this is highlighted in bright red, what I need to change that's unique for each guest. So we have templates within templates within templates. It's going to save you a lot of time and get that stuff out of your head onto the page. After I've invited my guests and they've accepted, I can move them over to the Done column. Now it's time to outline my topics for the show. In here, I go to the Show Outline template, and it's going to fill in some handy reminders about what I need to do to prepare for this interview. I've got a section for questions I want to ask, links and resources on the topic or the guest, and if I insert a little bio below here, it can format it for a podcast using one of these handy custom AI prompts. Now with these prompts, it's definitely an evolving art. You're going to have to play around to see what you need for your own show notes and assets, and we'll come to that a little bit later. Next, we move on to the Record Show. And here I have another template where I just have a list of my audio-video checklist. So things like choosing a quiet and distraction-free location, turning on Do Not Disturb on my phone, this one I always forget, having water handy and any necessary notes within reach, and confirming that my recording equipment is working properly. Can't tell you how many times I've had to scuttle an interview because I didn't follow this checklist. After the show has been recorded, I have a fairly repetitive series of tasks that I go through in my editing process. When it comes to your own editing process, my guess is that you're going to have a slightly different way of doing things than what I do, but I wrote up this list. You can add in whatever you want in this template. And the way to do that is just by editing the template here in the to-do list over in the right-hand corner. You press this little arrow next to the blue New button. You scroll down until you find the template that you want to edit. In this case, editing audio and video. I'm going to edit it and then plug in my own custom to-do list right here, so that anytime I'm editing a new episode, I have this clear, linear set of reminders, and I don't get hung up on any of these steps. Now, this next to-do is often one of the most frustrating and time-consuming for podcasters. This is the show notes, and I'm lumping in ordering the transcript because you can't really make great show notes without a transcript. If I click the show notes and transcript template, it's going to come up with a whole list of custom AI prompts. Now, these are prompts that I've played around with and personally used in generating my show note assets. I also have a section here to paste your transcript, and then these buttons will run off of the transcript to provide you things like a summary for the page, the most compelling quotes, some engaging blog post titles, SEO keywords, and finally, a full 250-word podcast description optimized for the SEO terms, along with a little guest bio. I've found that the AI is very capable. It still requires some oversight, and you might want to customize these buttons, again, by going over into the template for show notes, clicking edit, and adding a new button. Let's say that I also have an Instagram account. Maybe I'll come into this show assets section and I'll say, write an Instagram caption with 10 hashtags related to this page. All right, let's test this out. I'm going to pull up a random transcript that I had produced recently for another podcast, and I'm going to come in here to order transcript and show notes. We got to start over with our show notes and transcript template. I'll paste this below. And now let's just try out first some keywords. All right, there we go. We've got our keywords. Now let's try summarizing the page. How about a 250-word podcast description? In this episode of Mind, Body, Health, and Politics, host Dr. Richard Lewis Miller interviews Denise Kaufman. All right, looks like we've got a nice little start here. We'll have to edit it later, but it's definitely going to save us some time over starting from scratch. And then lastly, let's try out this new prompt. Write an Instagram caption with 10 hashtags related to this page. And there we go. We've got our hashtags, we've got our caption, and now we're almost ready for the final step, which is staging our social media assets and getting ready to publish this episode. Inside this last to-do, we're going to pick the Publish Socials template, and once again, we have a button to create our default social assets in the same way that we created our default to-do list. And depending on what our default platforms are, maybe we post an article on Medium, maybe we also post the video on YouTube, you can program within these further templates, such as a Medium article, where you might have a special template for how to write an effective Medium article based on different tricks of the trade. For your podcast, you might put in a show description that you generated in your transcript and show notes. I'll have to do a whole separate video on how to create an enhanced transcript out of your basic AI-generated transcript. That's my bread and butter. It's what I specialize in. Not every podcast needs it, but I find that it's a great option to give people to read instead of listening to your content. Once you've populated all of these fields and you're ready to send it, you can just check off these boxes for scheduled, and you're now ready to move this into the done column. You can also go back, and once this episode is published, flip it over into the published column, and assuming that it has an air date attached to it, if you go over to your broadcast calendar, there it is on the broadcast calendar. Since I'm still in the beta testing phase of this template, I am giving it away for free, but if you need a little bit of help configuring this, be sure to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you set it up. And if you're looking for someone to take even more of the work off your plate, reach out. We'll get you podcasting in no time so you can finish your work and go outside.